Everybody.
So my first question is, the language in the film, particularly the written text, is in like this coded shorthand. I'm wondering, did you lay out certain rules for that, or if it was just kind of on the spot as you were writing it?
No, for sure. The writer, Robert Higdon, he came up with the short form text, and he had a whole set of rules for it. And as we kept working in post, we actually had to expand it quite a bit. But I kept going back to him and saying, well, how can we do this? And the beginning of the film was a real challenge because there's really no dialogue for 20 minutes. So it was trying to figure out how to keep people engaged. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge, really, of the film. So, rather at the beginning, the first idea, to be honest, was not to hear any voices, just to have the text. And it wasn't, it just didn't grab you enough. So we came up with this way where, Darwin could at least communicate with his mother or try to, and we would hear the voices. And, but to answer your question about the text, yeah, it was something that we were always focused on, and what he would be saying and what you would see on the screen as well.
There's been a lot of dystopian sci-fi films about teen lovers in the last few years, and I'm wondering if, as you were making the film, you were conscious of certain tropes, or if you were trying to just make this film in the most honest way possible.
I mean, certainly, we thought about those other films, and we'd love to have those audiences, of course. But no, not really. I think it was really much more about the ideas, about, I have a child now who's 13, and this was, 4 years ago when I first read the script, but it really, it touched me then and still does now. I think my wife Annie was reading today that, kids, teenage kids between the age, I think, 12 and 16 spend 9 hours a day with some sort of device, mediating with some sort of device, interacting with. And that's more than they spend time in school, that's more than they spend time interacting with friends or their parents. And that's now, and I can only imagine what's happening, what's going to happen in the next 50 years. So to me, it always came across as something really prescient, the script, and as a cautionary tale. And I think, I have this thing in my pocket I'm addicted to, and I lie in bed and look at it, and I know I shouldn't. And just imagine what my kid Jake's kids will be like. So that was really the driving force behind the ideas of the film, rather than the love story, of course, was important, but that's what was really driving the filmmaking experience.
I believe as a director, your background is mostly in documentary filmmaking?
Yes,
yeah.
As a director, yes.
Yeah. Was it difficult transitioning into narrative film? And what were some of the challenges you faced in making the transition as a director from documentary to narrative?
Well, I guess good question. I think I've edited a lot of film and television in fiction, so I think for anyone wanting to get into filmmaking, editing is by far, I think, the best school, because it's every day you're learning to tell stories. So I don't think it's that much there's the big difference between documentary and fiction. It's really about getting that story across. So, and I'm doing a documentary now about an installation artist who works creating interactive pieces in public spaces, and the documentary also follows kind of the same ideas of this film. It's about bringing people together. It's about giving people a communal experience, and where they can share something together rather than always having these solitary experiences. So I wasn't really much of a challenge at all. I think documentary and fiction also are different in their ways, but I think storytelling is still storytelling.
Any questions from the audience? Yep. Yep. Go ahead.
Very good. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
What would you expect in your mind anyway? What's the world that we don't see? And at the end, who is the person viewing our hero? What's the world like for the people who are on the other side of the screen?
Well, I think it's left obviously a little bit ambiguous, but really the ideas that we had making it was the authority took over, and it was a world where people were so into their own world and playing games that they willingly accepted to be controlled. And then something happened, and that controlling body disappeared. So really, everyone is in their own pods following the rules that were set for them. And they kept doing it until someone like Darwin saw by some fluke, because he was forced out of his pod, that, really I don't have to follow this. And then he finds these communities living. He found one living off the grid, so to speak.
But the world that he doesn't see is being run by computers?
Well, basically, there's a head central computer, yes, giving commands to all these people, like that young woman at the end, who is also realizing, wait a minute, this guy isn't following the rules, and I don't have to either, perhaps. So it's like the beginning of, one would hope, the breaking of these bonds, that these kids can decide, I don't have to do what everyone is telling me. And I think what interests me is that we're also, all of us, willingly going into this world. And I think that's where we need to make choices to decide to not go there, to go together. I mean, I drag my kid camping every year because, you can't have your device. No, there's no Wi-Fi. And yes, we have to work harder to make our meals, but it's fun. And he likes it. He likes the chaos of it. He likes it's a new environment. And I think we all need and like that, but I think we can forget.
If I can just add a footnote, one
Yeah.
more reason to keep Wi-Fi out of the national parks.
Well, yes. I think, I'm from Montreal, and they've put Wi-Fi up and down some major streets. And I kind of almost get that, but again, I'm worried about it. But to put it in a national park, is that what's happening in Vancouver? Is that why you bring that up?
Yeah, there's a big debate going on with the national parks, whether they should, and they're introducing it into the key popular areas so that the American tourists can plug in their devices and find out where they are.
But are we talking about like Stanley Park or bigger, like a national park, like up in the...
National park.
That's insane.
I know.
How do you even what do you do? Like have these satellite... Okay, that really is scary. Didn't know that detail.
I saw a few drones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have these drones going around giving you your Wi-Fi, following you. That's very scary. Yes?
So do you have any distribution for your film?
Well, we have a distributor in the States who is beginning the process, but it's in its early stages. So, I hope so. Again, as I said earlier, it's harder and harder to get distribution. It's theatrically in Canada. It just, you do a week or 2 weeks, and the reality is not a lot of people come into the theaters. So you have to look at alternate means. But that's not entirely, it's the producers who are dealing with that, and it's not entirely under my purview. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yep, down there.
Where did you find those the dwellings, those bunkers?
The question is, where did you find the dwellings and the bunkers in the film?
Well, all of the exteriors that you see is complete CG. For a tiny budget, I think the CG guys did an amazing job. Basically, all we had was these long smokestacks that were in Sudbury and had been used, years ago and had been abandoned. But what we ended up doing was cutting the top off and keeping just the exterior. So when you see Darwin come out, the door is real, and the cement around him is real, but the other dwellings you see, and then you see in the wide shots where they have those round tops, that's all fake. So the only thing we really kept was the concrete. And there was a few angles that when I saw the CG, I was like, guys, this is amazing, because I was buying the world, and I was always wondering, are we ever going to buy this world? But hopefully, I think we all buy it.
Yep, there.
Yeah, again about location, because a choice, I guess, if you don't mind, in Sudbury, they have a lot of different landscapes that I was surprised. But how did you choose that, and how long did it take you to shoot?
So the question, I think, is how long did it take to shoot, and how did you find your locations?
Right. Well, obviously, financially, you're always looking for good partners, and Sudbury right now is, I wouldn't say exploding, but there's more and more films being shot there for many, many financial reasons. But it had a lot of different looks, and that's why we really went there. The mine was great. It had, the kind of desolate rocks, different kinds of, the red kind of rocks, which looked kind of burnt and, post-apocalyptic. Enough water, which I think was, also really interesting for me, just because it breaks up the landscape. And then, of course, the forest. And then the building itself that the family was living in, the designer did an amazing job of just adapting what we found. We found this one little building, and it was kind of like a side place beside a school. And so it was easy to drive up to, but it really looked like you were in the middle of nowhere. So all of that together, when we did the Scout, really came together and made for the decision that we went to Sudbury. And how many days? It was a 20-day shoot, and the flashbacks were done at a later date with the boy and the mom younger. That was done at a later date.
Time for one last question. Yep.
Costumes.
And my question was going to be costumes, and the sound effects were great. Can you comment on both?
Sure.
Costumes and sound effects.
Yeah, the costumes were done by a Québécoise. She did an amazing job too, and I loved what she came up with. There was something about it was just a nice mixture of textures. Some of the leathers, but a lot of the sewn materials, and they were just original enough that it felt like the future. So I loved what she did, and the sound effects. The guy who mixed it did all of the sound effects as well, and he really hopped on board. All of the first 20 minutes there was really nothing there, so he did all of the Foley, all of the movements himself. He sat there at the mixer and just watched the film and had mics, and so all the body stuff he did himself, all the breathing, that's the mixer. And then he had a guy who he sent out into the woods to go get real sounds. So instead of just using everything from banks, he went out and got us most of the birds, most of the wind, most of the trees, the water, all that stuff came from real sources. And he did just an amazing job. So, for the small budget that we had, I was super happy. And then to throw one more in, I thought the composers did a great job too. We talked a lot about different styles. Should it be more of a techno kind of treatment? And I tried it in post, and it just didn't make me feel enough. So we just decided to go with a more organic approach, using real instruments. Not too much strings, because I just didn't want kind of that maudlin feel. But again, I thought the balance was really well done.
Thanks for coming and bringing your film. One last round of applause, please. Thanks.
Thank everybody for coming. Thank you so much.